Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We are excited you could join us today for On Family Constellations Therapy. My name is Alex Elliott. I am the Senior Manager of Events and Engagement for the Public Programs Department of California Institute of Integral Studies, a nonprofit university in San Francisco. As many of us are descendants of settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcefully brought to this continent, we, CIIS Public Programs, must recognize and never forget that our university's building in San Francisco occupies traditional, unceded Ramaytush Ohlone lands. If you're interested in learning more about Native lands, languages, and territories, we encourage you to visit native-land.ca. Now let me first introduce our presenters, Mimi Savage and Marine Sélénée, and then we'll get right to the conversation. Dr. Mimi Savage is an associate professor, half-core faculty here at CIIS. She is a registered drama therapist, a board-certified trainer of drama therapy, and the education chair on the North American Drama Therapy Association, or NADTA, board. Mimi's research and publications center on the intersections of self-identity and complex trauma for young women adopted from foster care through the unique use of digital art app interventions and narrative drama therapy methods in arts-based narrative inquiry. Dr. Savage is founding chair of the Historically Black Colleges and Universities Initiative, the first NADTA outreach whose purpose is to increase diversity in the profession by inviting and supporting interested Black identifying folks. She teaches human development and family at CIIS, inviting students to explore their own family dynamics by designing creative, psychodramatic social atoms. Marine Sélénée is a New York and Miami-based family constellations therapist, author, and speaker. She offers in-person and virtual private sessions and workshops. She also speaks on panel discussions and at conferences delivering motivational speeches. In 2020, she joined the Hay House family, where her book, Connected Fates, Separate Destinies, Using Family Constellations Therapy to Recover from Inherited Stories and Trauma, will be published in the fall of 2021. Her unique approach to family constellations helps people heal from family wounds and find individual blocks rooted in the family system. Her clients are able to get to the root of their pain in order to not only heal themselves, but generations before and after them. Her greatest passion is sharing the transformative power of family constellations. And now it is my absolute pleasure to turn it over to Mimi and Marine.
Hello, hello. Thank you for that. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And welcome, Marine.
Thank you so much, Mimi.
I'm so happy to meet you. I've read your book, and I want to first off just thank you for the frankness of your writing. It's very personalized, and I think that's what makes it an amazing way of sharing and teaching.
Thank you so much.
And it makes it all very clear, you know, in this personalized way of explaining family constellations therapy. I actually was going to ask you another question right off the bat, but suddenly I'm inspired to ask you what, and I think there's a meta level response to this. So I'm hoping it's not a leading question. I have an idea suddenly that's come to me, but what inspired you to write this book? Because I've read the story about you going to England to learn English, and you've written this book in not your mother tongue, right? And here you are. And so that's my question. What inspired you? What inspired you now to write this book, or in the last couple of years? I know it takes time.
I think I just wanted to acknowledge the first 36 years of my life. I also wanted to honor my story, my past, my family. And I don't know, I do think, that family constellations is still, not that common therapy, like just a few people know about family constellations. If you want to know more about that therapy, of course, you have Bert Hellinger's books, like he's a founder of Family Constellations, but maybe it's a bit too difficult, complicated to understand his way of doing family constellations. Then there is that fabulous book of one of my teachers, Mark Wallin, It Did Not Start With You. But again, he has another view, angle, perception, I would say, towards family constellations. And then there is me, the Frenchy one, publishing in English. And I just wanted to desacralize, like the word therapy and family constellations, and just maybe give the opportunity of people like me, like to just understand that if you take care of your family story, if you take care of your past and you honor all of them, you can, like have a beautiful life. So yeah, that was my goal, like to give face to my readers. Yeah.
Well, it comes through, and it makes me think of towards the end of the book, this passage of a very personal story and how it's come full circle. You in England, you experiencing trauma as a young girl, and your parents investing in you to learn the language, and here you are. So it hit me. There was an image of that child and you now as a facilitator, and I just thought that was a beautiful image.
Thank you.
So for those who don't know and for those who do, just a little reminder of how you defined family constellations. I'm just going to give the blurb. In your intro, you defined family constellations as a therapeutic approach that considers individuals as part of a great transgenerational whole called a family system rather than lone actors. And I hear actors and players, and as a drama therapist, I get very excited. But it seems like the pivotal aim of this therapy is to experience a reconciliation between your past and present of what was and what is. And there's this secret weapon that you mention, that you write about in the book. Can you unpack that a little bit?
Yes, sure. So family constellation therapy, if you are not, if you don't know about, that method, it's all about uncovering and dissolving any blockages affecting your life through the story of your family. Meaning you go back to the story, you go back to former generations, you dive deeper into it. You also take a deeper look on your childhood, on what happened to you, what you witnessed as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult. And then finally, you enter the knowing field, which is a constellation itself, where I would say everything happens. It's like a theater, like a role player where you are going to channel repressed emotions, unsaid things, discovering maybe secrets, recognizing the pain, but not through who is it to blame for or complain or who is the guilty one. No, family constellation is a way of bringing back together what was once separated with no judgment, only with love, acceptance, and respect. And that's what I truly love with family constellation is you just become responsible for your life, for your destiny. And you understand that until you are not in charge of it, you might suffer or you might repeat over and over again the same pattern or behavior or toxic, mindset or thoughts. So that's what I love family constellations, because I don't know, for me, it was like, okay, I'm in charge. It's up to me. It does not matter what I did experience as a child, as a teenager, as a young adult. What matters is what I'm going to do with it. And I really wanted to reconcile my past, to be fully free in my present moment. I mean, in my book, the first time I did a constellation, it was to understand my love life. Because at 25, I thought it was my father's fault, and that I could not, attract a great man. So I was frustrated about it. And then Family Constellations offered me another reality. Another reality where, again, I was complaining and blaming someone else, for my chaotic love life. But it was just giving me tools and clues that look at the entire story. It's not only about one person. It's not only about your father. It's your entire family. And all of the women and all of the men that did play a part in it. So finally understanding, that collectiveness, that it's not only just one person messing it up, it tremendously helped me.
Well, I can see how you were inspired because you've lived it. It's a lived experience.
Yeah.
And it sounds ideal and it sounds wonderful. I'm ready to study. But I'm also looking at this because I'm thinking of, rupture, extreme cases, buying into this, because you mentioned unreliable narratives. And when I hear that, I think of, narrative trained folks like me, problem saturated narratives, problem saturated stories that we carry with us. I'm a loser, I'm this. And also it's wonderful. You speak of the founder, or maybe you didn't, Bert Hellinger.
Bert Hellinger.
This collectivistic idea, and also it's postmodern period when this is all developing, evolving with his studies in the 60s and his training. So it's this idea that you're not the problem is the problem. And it is more of we're in this together viewpoint. But with that, how does the client, especially the client that's coming from cultural rupture, and I'm skipping ahead here because I really do want to dig into that a little bit, and I'm certain you will because it's in your book. How do you buy into that? You're saying I went in for this seemingly simple question, like why am I not finding the love of my life or whatever, and then you went further in, and how do you as the facilitator facilitate the person who has such rupture in the background and in the foreground? There are people who are, it's constant. It's not a past history. It's now. There's rupture. There's disenfranchisement happening now. There's no belonging. You mentioned belonging even.
Yeah.
It's not happening now. There's no way to make it happen now. You heard that I study, foster care, and
yes,
it's just,
yeah,
there is no even understanding of that wonderful feeling because I've never had it. That type of vibe, right? So how does the client buy into this? Yeah.
So first thing first, foster kids and adopted children. I would say it is the most difficult story to heal from, because you don't have roots, or at least, you do not feel that you belong, because you don't have mom and dad, your biological parents, for whatever reason, it happens that you were adopted or put into foster care. So I have a few clients, adopted ones, foster kids, and I have a huge admiration for them, because we are going to work on two things. The first thing is you do have roots. No matter what, you will have a mom and dad forever. Otherwise, you would not be here with me today. That's for sure. And then when you got the chance to have a wonderful adopted family, like lovely, like adopted mom and dad, what we do in Family Constellation is we recognize the biological parents. Thank you so much, because thanks to you, I was able to become a mother and I was able to become a father. So we make room for the four parents, like being behind the child. So then the child can also receive from the four of them. Because then most of the time, also what happens is subconsciously there is a feeling of guilt. May I love my adopted parents? Especially when you do know that your biological parents are still alive. And then maybe you learn that actually they stayed together and they had other children together. But you are the only one who was adopted. And then, of course, there is more terrible and awful stories, like abusive, families, like foster kids being, like parents, foster parents after parents, like not finding their place, being completely lost. And that's the first thing first, is that feeling of belonging. I belong, I have a place. Every child needs to be seen, heard, and recognized. That's how you do know deeply in your core that I belong, I have a place. So yeah, like being adopted or foster child is the most difficult pattern, I would say, to heal, because you need to create a new foundation, and it's on you. It's really on you to develop, that I can have an inner mother, an inner father, so it takes more time. I'm not gonna lie here. Then for adults now with a normal family, I would say, just like mom, dad, how it works. Of course, I had skeptical clients trying to be like, how does that work, Marine? I really don't buy it. I hate my mom. I cannot stand my sister. Believe me, it's been almost 10 years since I've been doing it. So I heard a lot of things, and stories. But the thing is, and I would say the difference with family constellations is, yes, there is your story. Of course, we all have a story. Mm-hmm. But it is up to you to write the end of that story. Maybe you were born in a very abusive family, completely dysfunctional one, like awful. But now you're an adult. And I do believe that despite the worst nightmare that you could have experienced with your family, you still have the right to be happy. You still have the right to smile again and to give that gift to your inner child. And with family constellations, the story, I don't want to say it's pointless, meaningless, because that's not true. However, we do not entirely focus on the story, as your story does not define who you are. You define who you are. And when you do the constellation, we are actually going to work with your emotions and your feelings. And with your emotions and feelings, you cannot lie. You can come to me and tell me, Marine, I hate my mom. I want her to die. But as soon as you are going to enter the knowing field, doing your constellation, you are actually going to feel that scream within yourself, I just wanted to be loved. Because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing, to be loved.
So is this where that secret weapon comes into play?
I would say.
Yeah. Which you described as just acknowledge what is.
Exactly. And what was.
And what was. What is and what was.
Exactly.
And not to have anything around that, just it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That's Bert Hellinger is from Germany, so that's a straightforward way, deal with it, deal with it.
Right.
But for me,
also,
of course.
Marine, I was just going to say, because of what you just mentioned, knowing where he came from post-war, and it is what it is. You know, the Nazis were responsible for the Holocaust, and all of the remains of what that looked like, and the rubble and the rupture and the damage was what it is. It is what it is, and he saw that. And he was a priest before that, right? So, and he spent 16 years in South Africa. So something happened there so that he designed and devised this way of working that really was very concrete. It's very concrete. And the way you're describing it, although there's love and all of those things that you mentioned, it does sound very concrete. And you were going to say something. I'm sorry. I wondered if it was something to do about those narratives that we bring in, but still wonder how you buy into, you know, I have these narratives in my head, like you said, and that's a population that's really tough. Maybe the way to look at this is like a mock walk. How does this work in action? You know, I know what it looks like in a drama therapeutic action. There's role play, there's role reversal, there's constellations, there's psychodrama, a lot of the imagination use. And I wonder, what does that look like actualized in this method? I'm curious about method.
So I'm going to try my best to describe a family constellations in a workshop. Okay, because you can do both. You can do in a workshop and also one-on-one, you know. In a workshop, you are going to be with participants that usually you don't know them at all. They are complete strangers, okay? So you are going to ask to do your own constellation, and the facilitator is going to ask you, what would you want to work on? So then again, you can say my love life, my health, a Holocaust survivor, like, you know, whatever. The participants, again, they do not know you. They do not know your story, your emotions, your feelings, your relationship with your family, are going to represent for you family members or situations or emotions connected to the issue that you would like to work on and ultimately break free, you know, from it. So the facilitator is going to ask a few participants to enter the knowing field. The knowing field is the room where the workshop, you know, is happening, okay? And then the facilitator will ask the participants to find their place in the field, wherever they feel they want to stand up. So it can be maybe in the corner of the room, right in front of the client, you know, like doing his constellation. Like, it's really like just follow your gut feeling, connect to your second brain, you know, like your gut. Mm-hmm. And then the facilitator is going to ask, okay, just all take a deep breath, and you are just connect with your emotions, feelings, and tension. And I'm going to ask you just one question. How do you feel? And at that moment, you are not going to feel your own emotions and feelings. You are going to start experiencing someone else's feelings. And you do know they don't belong to you. And your job as a representative is to channel, you know, like this emotion and feelings. And then the client is, of course, going to hear, you know, like all of the different participants sharing, you know, like their feelings. And honestly, 90% of the time, it's just spot on. It's like, yes, that's a dynamic here. I can see my mom, I can see my dad. And me, it's been 10 years now that I've been doing family constellations, offering family constellations. And I can guarantee you, like when I was representing, you know, like for someone else's constellation, I had pain in my body that was not mine, you know, they were not mine. I was like, no. And so then the facilitator is just going to leads a constellation, based on the feelings and emotions and sensations, like happening in the field. And it's just like, it's pure. There is no more judgment. There is no more game. Of course, sometimes a participant is going to try, like to have fun, to fool you around, but you can see it right away, like, so you are just like, you know what? Thank you so much for everything. Could you please take a seat? And I'm going to ask another participant, to take your place, like, or also sometimes the participant is going to be like, I want to talk about me. Oh yeah, it feels so much like me. Like, no, it's not about you right now. It's about her or his constellation. So here again, very politely, nicely, you're like, you know what? Thank you so much for your help. Please have a seat, and I'm going to take another participant. And then finally, when you are in that, you can feel it, like it's in your core, like it's like a role playing, but with so much authenticity, honesty. It's raw, like it's kind of like animal, like you just go back to the basics of your life, like to just what is. And finally, the facilitator is going to ask either the client or one of the participants to repeat sentences out loud. So, I am your mother, you are my father, I now see you, what you did was wrong. Very simple sentences. And at that moment, your body, because your body remembers everything, it's really imprinted. You know that, Mimi. At that moment, you're going to feel it, that yes, it does resonate. And at that moment, you know that even so maybe it's still, wow, intense, powerful, you don't really understand how that person can represent my mom so accurately, why she doesn't even know about her, but your emotions do not lie. So then you just surrender to it. And you're just like, you know what? I'm just going to trust the process. I'm just going to do it. And that's the beauty of the constellation. Like when you drop the resistance, when you are just in the moment, you're like, yeah, let's talk about this story. That's true. I just want to tell my mom, I love you. I just want to look at my perpetrator and be like, you know what? You stay there. I will be here. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's an externalizing way of working. I may have missed this. I have a cup, and which is powerful because it's not, it's put out of your body, right? And you can see it. You're removed from it. It's at a distance. It's a drama therapist's dream come true. But here are my questions around that, because I have a lens, obviously, that's where I come from, and I really can see this and how it can work, because for some, it might be the first time that you're putting those stories out, be outside of their bodies, right? And they're like, can see that. And the person doesn't necessarily need to know the depths of your life. They're just players on this, chessboard, right? So here's one question. Does any of the backstory get told before the players go into the knowing space?
I do. Just for 5-10 minutes,
Okay.
I ask a few questions to the client. Bert Hellinger, for example,
right,
at the end of his life, like maybe 5-10 years, like before he passed away, he just asked one question. What do you want to work on? One question when you are a human being. I have to say more, please, like so.
right.
No, just one sentence.
Do you think it's because it's so intuitive, or?
Because I guess Bert Hellinger was like, now I can see it's even more powerful to do it in silence and just following the movement of your body.
Right.
But he's a man of experience. And his audience, during his workshop, they were willing to, like, okay, we're just going to follow the master.
Right.
It's me, I'm like, okay, your healing is going to happen through silence. No, Marine, I do not buy it. Right. I know I have to speak up because we do not trust our body. We do not trust our emotions, while actually so much happens in the silence. But we are still afraid of, that feeling of like, but it's empty, Marine. I need to be distracted. I need to talk. I need to say that I was right, that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I agree with you. Let's talk,
Right.
But, so yeah, like with my clients, Mimi, yes, for 5-10 minutes.
Right.
But you know what? Sometimes, because my last workshop last week, actually in LA, for one of the participants, it only took me 2 minutes to get, the picture. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And she was like, but I didn't tell you everything. I'm like, that's okay. You said enough.
Right.
And I was like, wow, you're becoming a badass, Marine, like, let's do it, like, I was like, okay, let's do it. But it's a practice,
Well, if you're facilitating, yeah, it's intuitive too. I have to think that it's intuitive, and it's what we learn as therapists to listen to our gut, right?
Exactly.
You said, trusting the silence, and it makes me think of a little bit of what you wrote about in your book about the pause. And I say this to my students: the pause, take the pause, because sometimes there's just so much junk. There's so much words, there's so much agenda, there's so much of this. And, I've been known to say, you know what, let's just stop. And so you really do unpack that in what you write about the pause. Do you want to talk about that a little bit and what you mean by the pause?
Yes, sure. For any types of modalities, healing modalities or therapies, I think it's important to pause for just a few days, a few weeks, because when you are going to share your experience, like share your thoughts with your friend, your partner, one of your children, of course, that person wants to answer your back, and even maybe share her or his own story, like, oh yeah, it reminds me that it happened to me, not exactly the same, but very lovely. But you are still processing a new picture, a new perception. Maybe it was very intense for you to finally drop your resistance, like stop complaining or blaming, or being like, I'm the victim. So I think it's always great to at least take 2 weeks self-processing what you just uncovered, learned, got from your work, like with that facilitator, that therapist. Because we talk a lot, and most of the time to say nothing. We also distract ourselves a lot because, again, we are afraid of feeling. So I think when we start our healing journey, we have so much to say because we still want to be right,
Right.
At the end, we want just to be happy. So it changes everything. But I think it's also important to take your time to just meet that new resolution, that new reconciliation, maybe that new awakening. Whatever happened to you, like in that moment, just take some time to make it yours. Because again, as I said to my clients, for me, it's going to make sense. But who cares? At the end of the day, I go back to my life. You go back to yours.
Right.
So make it yours. Reword my affirmations. Write your own sentences. Because also, I don't know for you, but my clients sometimes are so attached to what I just said. I'm like, who cares? Make it yours. Make it yours. It belongs to you, not me.
Yours. It's making me think of that acronym. I wrote it down that you have. It's 4 letters, but one of them is don't explain yourself. What is that one that acronym? What is it? You mentioned, I loved it. It was about, not making excuses. It's 4 letters.
4 letters, not making excuses.
Don't make excuses. Don't explain yourself. And it is what it is. And
it is what it is, yeah.
Yeah, it is what it is. And you mention it, and I'll find it, but I loved it because I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good tool, because all of that words around it, explaining it, and
Oh, it's isn't it the 4 useless W's?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
who, where, when,
Oh no,
what, no, not.
it's this one. Jade, justify, argue, defend, and explain. You know, like, yes, I have a Jade piece. I'm going to carry that. I love that. I mean, what an easy thing to remember, right? And it's just saying, justifying, arguing, defending, and explaining. I can imagine that that's, even if you're willing and you want to be and you trust in this method, you're bringing that with you, right? A client would be bringing that with them. Yeah, I'm wondering also how this works in this network idea, that we're all connected, it's interconnected. And I could say, oh no, culturally, I'm not connected. I am maybe connected culturally, and even, by race, by class, by whatever, ableism or whatever it is. But I'm not connected to this. And there's a dominant culture above me that's I'm not connected to. But then again, I am privileged. But then again, I mean, I could go to town on all of the, criteria that I've been offered, given, and categorized as, and that I can often intake as mine because of how I'm perceived. And I'm speaking about not just me, but how we are. So this network idea, way of seeing that, and this interconnection, even with a perpetrator, is it's a big thought.
Yeah.
And it's at the core of how you're working. So yeah, that and I know you did it,
Yeah.
you walked it. So
Yeah.
and I can imagine that it doesn't necessarily happen like this.
No. So yeah, like what Mimi at the beginning of our conversation was referring to, it's in my book, it's in chapter 6, on trauma, is long story short, at the age of 13, I was sent to England, to learn English, actually, because of course my parents, thought it was great, for my future career and life. And unfortunately, at that time, I was raped by a teenager boy. So at first, like I did a blackout. I completely, like forgot, about, like the event. But then I went to a deep depression. Like, it was the beginning, like of my healing journey as well. And I've never told my parents what happened. They actually learned about it, when I self-published my first book when I was 28. And we had a discussion, with my mom. And, she was like, why you didn't talk about it? I was like, because, the guilt, the shame, everything, like I just wanted to forget, like I just wanted to be a regular teenager, like with regular problems, like, and that's it. And so, of course, I did a therapy, EMDR, and everything, and it tremendously helped me. But then really like the last, piece of really healing from that event, from that occurrence, was with Susie Tucker, my other teacher in Family Constellations in 2014. I was finally ready to face my perpetrator. When I say facing, is because in my constellation, someone was representing him, like for me to acknowledge my feelings, my anger, my rage. And I remember, like all of these women literally carrying me, like being here, surrounding me, like, and that's when I truly felt the power of being all together, like facing him while being supported, like my mom or my parents, would have done if I would have talked about it. So my perpetrator is part of my extended family system, because what he did had an impact on me and my life. I was not the same before and after. And that's the same thing, you know, when there is war, or you are a refugee, or racism, or, you know, like abuse, anything, you know, like coming from another person, another race, another gender, it will impact you no matter what. So we are all responsible for our own behavior to respect each other, you know, like it's I am because we are, based on the Zulu tribe where Bert Hellinger, you know, like was in South Africa. That's actually when he kind of discovered the family constellation process, you know, because they had a way of talking in the tribe by actually doing a constellation, you know, like, and everyone was welcome to speak their truth, you know, like, and acknowledging what happened. So when you find, you cannot understand what a Jewish person went through in Holocaust. You cannot understand what a Black man may experience, you know, like in the street. You cannot understand an homosexual man, you know, like part of a very religious family, just trying to be with that man. You cannot understand a disabled person in a wheelchair. However, you can acknowledge and recognize that person as he or she is. I recognize your story. I recognize that what you went through must have been terrible. And I'm not going to tell you, I can feel it. That's not true. We are not part of the same story. We're not part of the same family. But I can definitely show an interest to learn more and not make the same mistake as maybe my former generation did. Because, for example, when you say, and I can say it, my father, you know, on my father's side, we are from Germany and Prussia. My last name is German. And I remember, you know, when we said, but where are you from? Your last name. When you said Germany, people look at you like you are the Nazi. And it's been 60, 70, right. 70 years now. But it's still, you know, like imprinted, you know, it's like, oh, you're from Germany. Okay, what's your story?
Right.
So, you know, like it's very important, you know, like even all of those cliches, you know, like we could go on and on. So that's what I think how we can work all together, that network of like my ancestors maybe that did mistakes. And I'm going to learn from them and I'm going to do differently. Because a new generation is a way of moving on and doing better. But in order to do better, we also need to talk about it because it happened. Slavery happened. Holocaust happened. Sexual abuse happened. And on and on.
So is this connected? And I'm going to turn on the light in a minute. I just want to let you know I'm not going to walk through, but it's getting awfully dark here in where I am. Is this connected to forgiveness? Because I remember that coming up in the literature and what you wrote. And I'm thinking forgiveness, I'm thinking of victimization, and I'm thinking of perpetrator. I'm thinking of what you just brought up. Is this about forgiveness? So,
as you read my book, I guess you saw my note about forgiveness. So, and that's interesting because last week again I did a podcast, you know, like, and I got the same question. Okay, in family constellations, and also me personally, I did not practice forgiveness with my perpetrator, for example. I did practice consenting to what was. So of course, we can say but Marine is just a word. Yes, forgiveness and consenting, maybe for you it's just the same thing. For me, it's not. I cannot forgive to my perpetrator because what he did, and pardon my French, was fucked up. He destroyed my teenager self. And not only for 30 minutes, no, for a lot of years after. Mm-hmm. I had to get back to my power. I had to get back to my sexuality, to my pleasure, to trust men, to trust myself, and so on. Mm-hmm. So whenever, someone was like, you need to forgive, oh my God, I was rageful. I was like, no, I didn't do anything wrong. The society, maybe wants me to think that I did something wrong, but I did not do anything wrong. When I finally discovered Family Constellations, and I read one of Bert Hellinger's book, we don't practice forgiveness. We practice consenting. I was like, oh, here is my exit. I'm going to heal. That's what I thought.
Right.
And when I did my constellation, Susie Turger never asked me to say, I forgive you.
Right.
Maybe one day I will say those words, Mimi, I'm not saying it.
Right.
I say, I consent to what happened. It's part of my story, but it will never define me ever again.
Right.
And at that moment, I broke the cycle.
Right.
But then it's very personal. When I work with my clients, especially on sexual trauma, like on perpetrator, victim, dynamic, I'm like, if you want to practice forgiveness, if you want to do the oponomo, I forgive you, I love you, do it. But I won't force a person who was molested for 10 years by her or his father to say, I forgive you. Because this father, maybe he was molested before, maybe, sure. I'm sure. But again, it's not an excuse. Mm-hmm. What he did was wrong, period. So that's why for me, it's easier to practice, consenting to what was.
Right.
Because the forgiveness as well can create a dynamic that I am the big one, like I can take care of it, like don't worry. You were the adult at that time. I was a child, but I'm gonna forgive you. No.
Yeah. No. So now we're going back to these dynamics of hierarchy and imbalance. And then also this idea of I'm a victim and you're a perpetrator kind of there. It constructs again, this small, big, bad, these polarities, and it sounds as if you're trying to deconstruct all of that stuff in this. I have a question about collectivism. I'm thinking about that now, and what Hellinger observed and admired and didn't have in his own culture, a very Germanic, stereotypical, I'm going with it. And just for the audience to know that I have a very French mother who's from Bordeaux, and I am biracial, and I'm just giving you my positionality in all of this. I identify as a Black woman. I have a Black father from Tennessee. I have a white mother who was abandoned in the war. So I understand the split in family dynamics. My father left at 13 to try to find a school. So I get all of this disjointed stuff, and I understand from my Black culture and even parts of the European French, the idea of the family, yes, for certain, but I guess this interconnectedness, but this collectivism that's very Confucianist. I'm a little confused because in the literature, in what you wrote, you talk about myself system and I come first when it comes to, for instance, something as critical as healing, and everything's critical, but as this, you give an example of being sexualized, being brutalized, and not forgiving the perpetrator, but this is my own self system. And I look at that and I think of colleagues who come from, not Western European, white influenced cultures. And that seems like a paradox. That seems like I come first, but it's still, the argument in the method is about collectivism, and that seems very individualistic. So I was just trying to unravel how that works in the method, and maybe I missed something.
No, Mimi, no. Again, it's I am because we are. It's like put the mask on your face first, before taking care of someone else. Mm-hmm. When you heal yourself, then you have the possibility to lead by example. And maybe it will give permission to someone else in your family or in your entourage to also be like, you know what? Maybe I'm also going to do it. When someone heals, it has an impact. It has an influence, on others. With Family Constellation, it has an impact on 7 generations. 3 before you, you in the middle, and 3 after you. Why is that? Because we are all connected, not only, with our stories, but also it has been discovered, scientifically speaking, and the term is epigenetic, that we can pass on traumas in ourselves. But when we are finally in a friendly, lovely environment, the miracle happens, our cells, become like, okay, the trauma got taken care of, we can just give birth to a new generation and have a better life, whatever it is. So let's say, for example, that you came from a very racist family, Southern family, and you witnessed, words, situation with your father, with your mother, and then finally you're an adult. And, you're in New York and you see the melting pot. You're like, wow, that's amazing, Indian, Afro-American, wow. And then you see that those people actually, they're nice. They're kind. They smile, and then you start wondering, okay, maybe that was their belief system. But what about mine? Maybe I can change this. Maybe I'm just going to learn, from these new people. And when you do that, you're going to change your belief system. You're going to change, your perception towards others. So, of course, how you're going to raise the next generation, how you are going to behave, with other people are also going to impact, your network. You are not going to perpetrate, what your parents, passed on to you. You're going to say, no, stop. I break free from that. It does not belong to me. I'm going to see my parents, from where they are. And maybe also through now my new belief system, and my new values, maybe they will change. Who knows? So that's why, yes, it happened at first as an individual. Maybe, what I learned from my family, maybe that's not my truth. Maybe that's not who I want to be. Maybe I don't want to be an addict. Maybe I don't want to be a single mom. Maybe I want to believe in love. Maybe I'm in love with a woman. And that's okay. And then, by changing yourself, as an individual, giving yourself permission, you will also have an impact on others. So that's where, for me, the collective, happens. Because you're not afraid anymore.
Right. So that self system is part of the interconnected, but you have to do you first.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking when you mention, I'm thinking of New York. I have a daughter in New York right now, and she's not probably too far from where but she's, it's a culture shock because everything is there. It's a vertical city. And I'm just thinking of how you mentioned in your book, because it's recently published, about the coronavirus pandemic, the Black Lives Matters movement, a first truly global, from Paris to Tennessee, we're all from wherever, all over the world, Nigeria, wherever. It's a global, we're globally affected, and not as if we weren't globally affected before, especially under this ideology or this philosophy or this belief system, and also others. It's not a new thought. Of course, we're all connected. But you say this, inflection point. There's an inflection point, a cultural and historical crossroads of great urgency. And I really appreciate you saying that, mentioning it in what you write. So how does that affect your practice right now? And how do you adjust as a facilitator with this time?
People, of course, like a lot of anxiety, like my clients being anxious, being afraid actually of another person, because now it's just like, do you have it? Like, can I get sick? Can I, just die? Like if I see you, if I meet you, if I touch you, if I kiss you. And that's division for me. That's just being afraid, like of your shadow. And of course, I understand the deep impact on an emotional level. And like you say, it was global. The world, just shut down, like for a year, like not knowing what was going to happen. And as a human being, we are not great at the unknown. We want to know, and for 1 year, every day it was a new information and something new was coming and another variant, Delta. And it was just, we were all losing our mind, I have to say, like it was very anxious, and again, the unknown. So I would say, so I stopped my workshops, of course, but in September of last year, I've decided to offer a workshop in person. It was in New Jersey, outside, with, of course, safety, but I was like, you know what, Family Constellations is about connection. And I'm a firm believer that now more than ever, we need to feel connected. I don't want to feed the division, like we have to be afraid of each other, okay? Because again, we are all in this together, and it's together that will make the difference.
Right.
And so I've decided to do a workshop, and I was like, you know what? If I got participants, amazing. If I don't.
Right.
And I actually got a waiting list. People wanted to come.
Yeah. But you've also adjusted online, or have you practiced?
Yes, online. Yes, I work also online, remotely. But I was also missing, like seeing, my participants, like, and we all cried.
Yeah. Because
we were finally reunited. Like we were finally connecting again, and I don't want to leave with fears, and we all need each other to be here for us, and I think we will overcome that situation. It's a very difficult time because it's not done yet, it's just like, it's an unprecedented time, but it's all together that we can make the difference. And it's like Black Lives Matter. Yes, it's all together. It's not only because you are Black no, it's because you are white, because you believe, like in human rights, like you want to learn. You will never understand what it is, but again, you can be like, you know what? Let me understand your story. Let me see, what's going on for you. So then maybe I can help you in any way, just by changing, my behavior, my perception, like just acceptance and respect towards your person and recognizing you as you are. And I think, with Family Constellation and with COVID, that's what happened. It was like, you are afraid, you are anxious. Okay, I see you. And you do not need to do more.
Right.
Stay
Going
where you
back
are.
to no need to explain, no need to,
No need,
right?
exactly.
Back to
No
that
need to
effort.
explain it, nothing
Yeah.
like that. So yes, now I work more remotely for sure, Mimi, that's for sure. I really enjoy it. I also enjoy having smaller group of people, to do my
Yeah.
workshop because we need to be hugged, we
To be
need to be
connected.
touched. We are human beings. So I think it's also important to go back to life
Mhm.
because life is still happening.
Well, it sounds like in the knowing place or a group that gathers, first of all, it takes a willingness and courage. Yeah. And a facilitator that welcomes and invites. So that sounds like what happens with
Yeah.
your groups, but also it's almost a microcosm of um, the larger system. Just meeting up. There's the microsystem of a macro. It's an
Yeah.
interesting. I'm just seeing it that way now from listening to you and what the ideals are of doing this kind of work. We're about ready for a Q&A. We're at that point. I wanted to ask you one more question though. Are there any, from what you've heard, because you've been doing this for over a decade, and
Yes.
I thank you for all your transparency and everything here in this. It's been really lovely. Any misconceptions about this type of work? I know that you don't necessarily have to be licensed, and some people are. Some people have combined this kind of work with the work that they've already done, or this is all they do. So have there been any misconceptions in the practice of it and the theory behind it that you've heard, that because you've definitely given us truths by what this is about. So your book is really clear. So yeah, I just asked that question. Not to we won't land and end on a Debbie Downer. We're gonna have
Yeah.
Q&A, so we'll be we'll be fine. But yeah.
um, I would say it's like that passion now to become a yoga teacher. Everyone wants to become a yoga teacher,
That's right.
but not everyone can be a yoga teacher. So of course, like you can be licensed as I was, like back to Paris, with my studies as a psychologist.
Right.
Then I discovered Family Constellations, and it was love at first sight. I trained with Mark Wallin and Susie Tucker. I really took it very seriously. I think for any therapies or healing, you also need to be cautious, like because you are going to work with people. That's real shit here. You're
Mhm.
going to hear things, that if you have not a proper, like education and training, you can just run with all of your clients. So I would say just ask yourself, why do I want to be a yoga teacher? Even a Reiki master, a family constellation facilitator, like, is it because I want to save the world? Wrong answer. Or is it, because I do, like resonate, like with that type of work. I
Right.
want to learn more, but I need to take care of my own beep before.
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's what we do, like as a psychologist, we need also to do our own therapy.
Sure.
And so just, be aware of that, because right now everyone wants to help everyone. It's like, okay, I'm going to be a helper. That's wonderful. But you can also just give back to your community by just, like, I don't know, bake pies, like that's it, like, or help a homeless, like person, So there is also that tendency right now, like, oh, it's so cool to be spiritual and understanding everything. No, that's not cool, buddy. Like, believe me, like you also have to be prepared,
Yeah.
like, so yes, but, I trained with so many people. I don't even think half of us, like became, like a facilitator,
Right.
like I think it's also very personal. Like it's a philosophy, like also of seeing life, like of perceiving life through another lens. So for me, it was love at first sight. It was just an evidence.
Yeah.
But again, like I think it's also important
Yeah. I appreciate
to
that.
study and educate yourself
Yeah. On anything. Yeah. You don't want to
on anything.
harm.
Anything.
And I appreciate that you followed the passion, that's the best. That's the best research. That's the best facilitating. That's the best anything, right? That you're not doing it because you're supposed to, or whatever reasons behind it. I don't even know how that really gets done. We have some, I think, Q&A there we are. There's a Q&A section right there that we're going to look at, and I'll read to you.
Tell me, Mimi, listening.
Yeah. It says, here's a question from the audience. How does family constellation therapy differ for victims of acute trauma versus ongoing and repetitive trauma? Okay.
How does family constellation therapy differ for victims of acute trauma versus ongoing and repetitive trauma?
So
I hope.
Yeah, go ahead.
I hope I understand the question in the right way. There is actually no difference. We will acknowledge maybe one single trauma, one situation. And then maybe for example, if you were molested on 10 years, or if you were sexually abused at the age of 5, 10, 15, 20, we will take care, of each and different situation at each and different age. So of course, the root is the same, maybe sexual abuse, and maybe we just need to acknowledge and work on the sexual abuse aspect of it. What I can see in family constellation is your pain, your situation did not start with you. Mm-hmm. It already happened in your family system with someone else in a different generation. So whenever a client is like, Marine, I have suicidal thoughts, that's not you in your family system. You are trying to resolve something on behalf of someone else. Mm-hmm. So if it's a repetitive trauma, for me, it also means that the trauma that you did experience was not recognized at first, by the family member in question. So but we will, of course, work on individually on each trauma, and then at the end, it will create your entire constellation, I would say.
I just had a thought that in the action of the doing of this, of facilitating this, I see what you painted for us, this picture of people playing the roles or being the roles, taking on the role taking, as I would call it, and maybe role playing. Is there any role reversal happening ever? Is there any where is that, the person who has, you've conjured up, this is the father, this is the mother, this is the brother. Is there a role reversal? Because, oops, I'm hitting my mic here. Is there any role reversal ever happening? Does that ever happen?
Of course, Mimi. Yes. It happens.
And what about playing the metaphor? What if it's like, what do you do with that language? I'm just curious about this. The storm within me. And does anybody ever get to play the storm?
Yes.
Okay.
The storm, love, anxiety,
right.
Even a house sometimes, yes, of course, you can represent anything, Mimi, really anything. Or sometimes, you can have an expression, I'm completely lost. Okay, here, that's your feeling of being lost.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. No, that clarifies it so much. Such an externalizing way of working, and I'm biased about that, but I believe it's a way of working. Here's a question. Would this be a helpful modality in healing lack of belonging or connection, or not being able to make commitments in this world? So would this be a helpful modality in healing lack of belonging, which is really centered in your writing, or connection, or not being able to make commitments in this world.
Well, that's the purpose actually of family constellation.
Question.
It's actually to feel that you belong, that you're connected, that you can commit, like in this word. The words like commitment, belonging, and connection, most of the time they are linked to the mother, the relationship with your mother, like because
Attachment. Yeah.
Exactly, attachment. That's what I was gonna say, like so. I would say, yeah, just like maybe take a closer look, deeper look on your relationship with your mom, like how you did interact with her as a young child, like how is your relationship with her right now? Because how you show up, how you stand up in the world, it's, I don't want to say always because, well, but 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's connected, like with your parents. Everything starts here, like with your family system, like so.
Yeah, it's very
so yes,
developmental.
definitely.
It's developmental lens here. I was actually, the question that I'd actually written down was, I was wondering about the connection through a developmental lens. And, we know that the theory Hellinger came up with, he was a psychoanalyst. And so, or yeah. And so, yeah, narratives.
So yes, it is helpful.
Yeah, attachment.
Yeah,
this is attachment. This is connected to attachment theory and human development and family, right? Let's see what else we've got here. We've got how would family constellations therapy look for individuals without parents or regular caregivers? And I'm thinking maybe you kind of looked at that a little bit with the foster care or adopted youth or person's story narrative, but it's true. Wow, there we are looking at attachment again, right? So how does that, so what I'm remembering from what you just said and also from what I read is that we find, we symbolize, we replace, we get one, we get a mother and we get a father and whatever else, or a caregiver, I should say, because
a caregiver,
our definitions, mom, but caregiver.
Exactly. So individuals without parents, it's impossible. You have parents, like for sure, like again, you need a mom and a dad, like, and I'm also talking sperm donor or egg donor, like it's still, like a woman and a man, like being part, like of your birth. But to answer your question, you need, or together, like with your therapist, you need to create that new foundation. You can work with inner parents, an inner mom or inner dad. You can also create a picture of an ideal mom and dad for you. And of course, it's going to take more time. Again, not gonna lie here, like, because it's always harder, like to create from scratch, your own foundation, while actually it's your parents' job. But it's not impossible, because normally you can always find one strong figure of a male and female, even an imaginary one, like even in a cartoon, like even maybe, like on the street, like you witness, a lovely, situation between a child and her mom, and you're like, you know what, I like this. I'm just gonna keep it. I'm gonna put it in my toolbox here. And whatever, I feel, that I need that type of love, I will give it to myself. Then in a way, like you become your own parents, parenting your inner child, sheltering your inner child. Because even with parents, their job is done. When you are an adult, you're not going to come back. Hey, mom, dad, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. Like, no, stop. It's not going to change anything. The love that you wanted from them, give it to yourself. The respect that you wanted from them, give it to yourself. That's kind of the same thing with your partner in your love life. The love that you want from him or her, give it to yourself at first. It starts with you. So family constellation therapy will help you to create that foundation that belonging, that attachment that I can definitely offer to my inner child. So the little boy or little girl that used to be, the love, the presence that he or she needs in order to be at peace.
I hear you, and I'm thinking even more so how this could be something, a way of working with people who actually are of that population, who are motherless or caregiverless, because, and here's the difficult part: if you haven't have not interjected some sort of good enough mother, it's really problematic, because you're not attached, and your lens on the planet and even your development in your brain is affected. It hasn't been stimulated. That hasn't happened in your brain. And so I wonder if that person would seek it out, because they don't have a knowing of it, and the behavior is definitely affected by that. Relationships are problematic, because you need that introjected parent caregiver. But then you speak of the internalized parent, and I'm wondering how healing this could be, in at least getting to a place, someplace, with this. And I'm thinking, wow, this could actually be devised really for a population of folks who haven't had that introjected parent caregiver. It's hard.
It's hard. It's very hard. It's
Right.
very, very hard, Mimi. Again, that's the
You
most
don't know
difficult thing
it.
to heal.
Yeah, it's not your brain. It's
Yeah,
literally, it's neurological.
It's an everyday practice, like it's an everyday work, but I also want to trust that your story deserves to get an happy ending, with or without parents. Because you can also have, like you say, like parents, but shitty ones, like awful. I also think that if you are alive and you know that you are going to place your kids, for adoption, it can also be an act of love, knowing that you cannot be the mother or the father, that you wanted to be for your child.
Right.
Of course, again, you never know who is going to adopt your child. And as Bert Hellinger says, it's always better for the child to stay in the family, like be adopted by grandpa or grandma or an aunt or an uncle. It's always better, like to, of course, like have the same culture and language, and everything. But I also think sometimes it can be seen as an act of love.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're not not talking about abandonment or neglect or abuse.
Yeah.
But that's what you find a lot of in that population. But
yes,
I was just
of
thinking
course.
of that not having that introjected caregiver, not having that gaze as an infant. There's so much around that, but also how this could be helpful because of that. Everybody deserves, a story, a happy story, and everybody deserves to be witnessed. And I think that's what this is a lot about. This is about being witnessed and seen, right? You're literally being present with strangers, and they're seeing you. That is so moving. You don't, and it's almost anonymous, in the sense that you walk into a room and you're going to be witnessed. And somebody's going to play your story, and what we call playback as a method in drama therapy is people actually play back your story with their bodies, sometimes with their words, but not a lot of words. And it's very moving because it's like, that's my story.
Yes, exactly.
And it's so powerful. I want to, we have some time here for, let's see. Yes, we answered that one. How can we integrate the lessons we learn from playing the family members of others into our own lives? Yeah.
That's a very good question. Actually, you can even get more from someone else's constellation that's yours, because you don't have that emotional attachment, like to the outcome, like I need to heal, like I need to get a resolution here. So actually, it's pretty natural, like by just representing maybe a mother, you're going to be like, wow, it sounded so much like my mom as well. So now I'm in a better place to understand her. Oh, wow, I just represented anxiety, or I represented a perpetrator. I remember once I did represent the perpetrator, and at first I was like, no, I don't want that. You know, like just like, nope. And I was like, you know what? No, it's still a person, because a perpetrator was also a victim first. You know, like there is never, you know, like it's always, you know, actually who is a perpetrator, who is a victim, you know, like who is. So it has always been very, I would say, enriching, you know, for my own healing journey to represent actually other characters, you know, and family members, to actually feel more connected to my own truth, to my own reality. So you will see it's pretty natural actually to integrate, you know, like the teachings, you know, like the feelings that you're also going to experience, you know, by representing someone else.
Yeah.
And that's when I say we are all connected, you know, like at the end, you know, like there is always a common thread, you know, like between the participants, always.
Right. Yeah,
always.
it's group dynamics, that common
group dynamic.
and it feels almost magical, but it's not.
Yeah, sometimes it feels that way, you know, like it's not, you know, I don't want to be like, yeah, it's all about glitters and unicorns, you know, like no.
No.
But
Yeah.
I have to say, even I share my story with my father, you know, like, and it took us a few years to arrive, you know, like to that place. But it happens.
Right.
It happens.
Yeah, in the text you share that space of almost a decade of your father ending relationships because of his own journey, but his own story of abandonment or feeling that he needed to cut off, which was a shock to you and your brother. And then it came around. And yeah, everyone was deserving of that, no matter what the issues or the challenges were. Everybody, it was a repair.
Yes, exactly. It was a repair.
Clear repair, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's happily ever after. It just
no.
Right.
No. It's a work in progress, but it happened.
It happened. Yeah. I still think that witnessing, that being seen, that playing back the story, these are really powerful tools. Now that I can see you in the space and how you facilitate, and I see the circle, I see the space in the middle, I see the players coming in, I see the commitment, and some people not taking it seriously because they, you know, wherever they are, but that those people who are committed to the role taking, it's called role taking, and then even role creating, which is so psychodramatic, by the way, but without making scenes or anything. But I just think that is so rich. And it's so, I don't know how else, prescriptive to developmental challenges, like theory needs, you know, like attachment and what so much has been written about when it comes to human development. I'm actually teaching that course, so it's fresh in my mind. Okay, so how can we bring this work into the community instead of just impacting individuals? What a lovely question. Wow. Well, there's many communities, right? Now, I think this first means the larger communities, because you're creating new communities every time you do a facilitation.
Yes, that's what I was going to say, you know, like the constellation itself is a community, you know, like already, like, so, you know, Bert Hellinger once did a workshop for September 11th. So the families, you know, who lost, you know, like family members, and the terrorists, you know, like being all together. He also did a workshop between Nazi and Jewish people, representing Nazi and Jewish people. I think also he did something on slavery, white and black, you know, like, and actually the work is already part into the community, you know, like we can, because we can constellate anything.
Right.
Like it does not stop to your family system, like it's just using a modality, like to constellate and see, like what's going on, like, so I don't know, if I want, I can even constellate the Obama, like, and someone is going to be Michelle and, like Barack and the daughters, like, but we need permission to do it.
Right.
That's also the key, like you cannot constellate something, like without permission. So all of the participants, like agree also to share their stories and to not talk about, like the other participant stories, but that work, I would say, is already into the community, like we are all doing our part, like, yeah.
It's good to know. I think of in my community or my practice or my modality more so, let me narrow it down. I think of somebody like Armand Volkas, who is actually on faculty at CIIS, who does healing the wounds of history with role playing and meeting those people with contentious background, Korean, Japanese, whatever it may be, Palestinian. So it's really refreshing. And I didn't know that Hillinger, of course, that makes sense. It makes sense in the practice from, how it expanded. It has to, because the theory behind it is that we're connected. So,
Indeed.
How else could it not be? It goes back to the micro and the macro. We've got a couple more questions and just, I think, enough time here. Yes, back into the community and not just impacting individuals. And I want to say something about that too, Marine. The individuals that are impacted are affecting the greater community. Mm-hmm. Those individuals are going back into the larger community. So I just wanted to respond to that actually by doing that more intimate work, it expands, it's affecting others. It affects families that those people will create or go back into, or you've gone back into your family with this knowledge. It affects a greater number of folks every time it's facilitated, or every time it's processed. So there's something about that, it just dawned on me.
For sure.
So a question from Nayakel is, coming from someone who is queer identified, is there space in family constellations therapy for chosen family? I think that's something you were tapping into. You would already, chosen.
Yes, there is, so there is your family, that's your primary family, like mom, dad, grandpa, your ancestors. But then, of course, there is your chosen family that definitely, can be part of your constellation as well. And there is always space, it's like you choose, like your husband, your wife, your partner. Like, it's not, an arranged marriage, like you choose that person, to be part of, like, hey, would you want to be part of my family? And then we can share, like a family together, because then together we're going to create another family. So of course, there is space in family constellations for chosen family as well, like our friends as well, of course there is.
But the work invites us to look at what's not so comfortable in the not chosen family and the chosen family, to not ignore or pretend it's not there. It's asking us to
nothing in family constellation can be ignored or estranged.
Right.
That's also part of the book, like everyone and everything needs a place. So then, we don't repeat the same pattern or issues. That's very important.
Repeating patterns.
Yeah, repeating patterns, yeah.
I think that was our last question. I want to just hold out this book.
Yay, I have it too.
There it is. I think the image of the tree and the image of the tree, there's a person rooted, and I think of narrative ways again of looking at therapy, stories and roots and trees and leaves and landscapes in the ground. nurturing. I want to thank you so much for
Thank you so much,
this
Mimi.
time. It's been really a pleasure just digging into what it is that you've lived and what you facilitate, and perhaps what you're even teaching others.
Yes.
Yeah, this is that other level. So I want to thank you for that. And maybe now we're gonna, if there's anything, are we good? Are anything else that you want to add to this?
No, thank you so much, Mimi. Like it was such a pleasure, like to talk with you, and thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
my pleasure. Definitely my pleasure. Very excited about doing this. And so we're going to pass it on back to Alex and say thank you to the audience
Thank you
also
so much for attending
Thank you.
tonight.
Yeah.
We hope you'll
Thank
join
you
us
so
for
much.
more of our upcoming talks and workshops. This conversation was recorded, and if you'd like to watch it again or share it with your community, it will be available on our YouTube channel at this same link and on our Facebook page. We will also feature this talk on our podcast, which you can find at CIISpod.com or by searching CIIS Public Programs on your favorite podcast app. Thanks again for joining us, and have a wonderful night.